Many school days were met with the challenge of no lunch, bottomless shoes, freezing temperatures without a coat, and more. Yet, I persevered. For those of you joining us, we're continuing our previous conversation with Joshua Rosenbaum, editor, author, entrepreneur, historian, father, husband, and more. We'll be deepening our conversation on educating Black boys. Joshua, welcome back to Flying on Broken Wings. For those of you who may have missed our initial broadcast of this series on educating Black boys, Joshua comes to us as the author of his new book, Educating Black Boys Towards Excellence and Liberation, an African-Centered and Buddhist Approach.
Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, so high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, so high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, flying on broken wings.
Welcome back to Tiniest Footprints, Early Learning Childhood Center here in Clifton, New Jersey. And welcome to Flying on Broken Wings. Joshua, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, and listen, we talked last time about educating Black boys. Based on our last conversation, let's break down some of that information that you shared last time.
Sure. Last time we talked about a new approach to education, an African-Centered and Buddhist approach to education. And I think it's a revolutionary approach because we're really addressing the needs of our Black boys. And by addressing the needs of our Black boys, we're addressing the needs of all students in a way. African-Centered is really talking about embracing the history and culture of African people, which we know doesn't happen often. And it also says that we want to empower young people to transform this system in a way that really helps the whole collective, rather than only a few or a small percentage are able to be successful. We want to create success for everyone. And so this approach is also a Buddhist approach because it asks teachers to do the internal work so that they can transform their classroom as well. So we integrate it and we say this is an African-centered and Buddhist approach so that we can transform the classroom, transform the school, transform the community, and hopefully transform society.
And I think that what you're saying makes so much sense. But I think also we still have that group of people who just kind of holding on to the thinking that if we allow this kind of approach to become a part of the educational process, then we're going to lose something. When in essence, we're not losing anything, right? We're gaining something by doing this. So I think until we can get people on board with that and get them to understand that nobody is taking anything from you, all we're doing is adding to the equation, right? Because that's really what should be happening. Because when we think about all of what you've said, we are still leaving out a group of people, a whole group of people who have made so many contributions to this country in itself. And so leaving them out actually takes away from the educational process when we look at it as a whole, right? Would you agree with that?
Definitely.
Yeah. So we definitely have to make that approach. So, when I think back on the reasons why I was in school and the fact that I had a different kind of need, especially being a girl, and juxtaposing that with being a boy, and a Black boy in particular, I want you to think about this question. The question of the African-centered or Buddhist approach to education of Black boys, and what that means in terms of the connection that's missing. So we know that there's a connection that's needed, and it's missing. How can we actually connect those two things? What can we do?
Well, we have to look at where our Black boys are. And one, of course, we see that collectively they're scoring the lowest. Collectively, we have the most challenges with discipline. And we look often at our black boys from a deficit point of view. African-Centered and Buddhist Approach looks at them from an assets point of view, saying you are connected to this rich culture. You're connected to this rich history. There's something so powerful within you. And it's our job as a community to unlock that. You know,
So stop there for a minute. Let's go back. Something you just said that's really important. We talk about how to get our black boys connected in the way that you're talking about. So if we were to have this kind of approach in our classrooms, imagine, just being the devil's advocate, imagine me saying to one of my white students, I need you to be connected to this African-centered approach or this African-centered and Buddhist approach. How do you think that's going to go over, right? The parents, when we think about the parents, you know, we know that the students are going to give us a little bit of pushback, unless, of course, it is a teacher like the one you described, where whatever is inside, they know how to bring it out and bring those children on board. But that's not the parent. That's not bringing the parents on board, and it's not bringing the Board of Education on board. It's not bringing those people on board. So how do you think that would play out in the classroom?
I mean, one, children are much more open. So I don't think we're going to have issues as much with the children. With the adults, yes, we may have some issues. But the reality is, if we're trying to change this dynamic to really uplift all students, then we have to do something differently. We're already connected into and embracing other cultures, other ways of thinking. As black people, we're asked to do that all the time. So it's not really a challenge to say, okay, we want you to embrace this. And by embracing African-centered education, again, there's so many universal applications that uplift everybody in the classroom and in the community.
Okay, and I think when you think of it in that way, there's still some work to be done, right?
Of course.
Because as you pointed out, we can bring our students on board. Because once we have our students in our classrooms, our students begin to respect us, they begin to trust us, and they know that we're taking them on this journey, not a destination, but a journey. They're going to fall in line with us. But those parents are still going to be the problem for us. And so I think that's where the work is going to have to start. So having said that, and thinking about your book, are there tools in your book for parents that they too can go to? We know that there's some there for teachers and administrators, but what about the parents? Can they pick up Joshua Rosenbaum's book on educating black boys, and they're not black, but pick up that book and say, oh, there's something in here for my children as well? Talk a little bit about that.
Definitely. And I'll start with a saying that comes from the Dagara people of Burkina Faso. And what they say is that every child comes here bearing gifts. It's the job of the adults in the community to bring forth those gifts. And those gifts are for all of us. So if we're not helping every single child bring out the gifts that are already within them, then we have failed as adults. So this is really the responsibility of all of us. I don't necessarily think that all people will actually embrace this. I understand what culture we're living in, what society we're living in.
Of course.
So this book is really focused on those people who actually care and want to do something, and they want to do something more. It's not trying to pull in people who they already have put up a wall. That's okay. This is to empower those people who want to empower and uplift our black boys. And again, as you asked, there's a whole bunch of tools in there. And there are 20 chapters, and each chapter, as I stated in the previous segment, can be read alone or it can be read all together. And you can pick and choose whatever you need, whatever's going to help you where you are, where your child is, to address any concern or issue or any way you really want to help change this and transform it. We all know that there's a great challenge in education right now. We understand that. And again, if we keep addressing it the same way, we're going to get the same results.
Insanity, right?
That's it.
The definition of
The
insanity.
definition of
The very
insanity.
definition.
That's it. You know, so we really have to embrace what's within African-centered culture is great wisdom. There's great wisdom there. That's not only to uplift black boys, to uplift all of us.
Right.
And I think all of us are struggling. You know, all of us are struggling because we have a culture and society that does not embrace all of us, especially those people that look like us, right? But even other folks who are part of the white society, dominant society, they're struggling as well.
Absolutely.
In a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
And our struggles are connected, whether we realize it or not. But if you are able to uplift those on the very bottom, you're going to uplift everybody. We know that. We've seen it. That's what history is. History keeps teaching us these lessons. That's why history is an integral part of African-centered education, because it keeps on teaching us if we really study it.
Right. Okay, and this again, some very, very powerful information here for all of us. And hopefully those people who are out there listening, our audience, you're going to get something from this as well. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation with Joshua Rosenbaum. Stay right there. So Joshua, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about
Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. Flying high, flying high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, so high, flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, so high. Flying on broken wings. I'm flying high, flying on broken wings.
Welcome back. We're here at Tiniest Footprints Early Learning Child Care Center in Clifton. I am Dr. Phyllis Bivens Hudson from Flying on Broken Wings, and we're here with Joshua Rosenbaum. Joshua, this is a quote from your book, one of your reviewers. I'd like you to speak to this. We have to change the inequities in this country's educational system to ensure that our black boys and girls have the same opportunities to realize their full potential. Can you talk a little bit about those inequities in our education system that perhaps this viewer was referencing?
Definitely. That's a great, quote, because if we don't deal with some of these inequities, we're going to pay for it down the line. We've already seen what's happened. So many of our black boys get caught up in the prison system, or all sorts of different ways where they can't live up to their full potential. So if we really want to address inequities, we have to start recognizing that there are inequities. And the inequities are rooted in a broader system. It's not just an educational system.
Right.
So that's a real issue that this country doesn't want to face. You know, there are certain communities where we know they're going to get less consistently. You know, I work in one of these communities in Brooklyn, in Brownsville, which is probably the second poorest district in New York City. And unless you address the greater issues of what's creating that iniquity, then we can't really address that in the schools. We can try, we can begin, but we're not going to be able to completely do that. And some states in place have done that, you know, where they're in New York City, we have what we call community schools, where they are giving more resources to the schools, but it's still not going to be enough. You
The
know?
Band-Aid approach.
Exactly.
So stop there for a second, because you mentioned that you are a part of the New York school system now, right? In the Bronx, did you say, the Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, the
Brownsville section of Brooklyn,
okay.
yes.
And so knowing you as an educator, I'm also knowing that you are still doing something with education. Tell us what your position is there, and tell us how that's relevant to the work that you're doing also.
Well, it's important that you are doing the work. If we're going to speak about the work, there are people we know in education who are not doing the work, but they get on stage and they start speaking about that, like they're authorities. And in other fields, we see that as well. So I've been working in education for over 20 years now. I'm currently in Brooklyn as a community school director, which gives me an opportunity to take a leadership role outside of the classroom. It's been really powerful because I have more creative voice there. I'm experiencing a whole lot more. This experience compared to what was happening in New Jersey is eye-opening because there's so much more that I'm able to do, but it's still not close to what we really need to do. Like you said, it's a Band-Aid. It's a beautiful Band-Aid, but really we need to do so much more to address these concerns. You know, I'm in a district where 1 out of 6 students is their family is a student in temporary housing. Imagine that in the richest city, you know, in the United States, and probably one of the richest cities in the world, that we still see children don't have a steady place to rest their head at night.
So, Joshua, last time we talked a little bit about the business of cultural relevant pedagogy. So we're going to go back to that for a moment, because we also mentioned Gloria Ladson Billings. And so we want to talk about her quote. And this is the quote that I read from her. She said, "What is right with black students? And what happens in classrooms where teachers, parents, and students get it right?" So we know we were accustomed to hearing the other way, right? What is wrong with black students and the teachers who support them and so forth. So from your own teaching perspective and your experiences, how would you answer that question? What is it that's right about what our black students are doing and those teachers who are servicing them? And you'll notice that I said those teachers, because it's not just black teachers who are getting it right, and we don't want our audience to think that it's just black teachers who are getting it right. So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's really powerful that she starts again with what's right, because when teachers go into a classroom and they're focusing on what's wrong, they're not seeing that child. They're not seeing the whole child and all that they're capable of. And when you come in with a mindset that says, I know this child can do some really powerful things, it's my job to help them. And it's my job to connect with them. And you see in those classrooms, you see this magic start to unfold. And it takes time sometimes. I know when I would first start teaching, sometimes what I would do is put on the board a T, and well, before that, I would ask my students, how many of you are Africans? Now I was teaching, you know, in New Jersey in a place where it was 99% African or black. But they weren't connected to their African history and culture. So I would get maybe 1 or 2 people to raise their hands.
Who probably were really from Africa, right?
Now, they would be calling each other and this and that and that. You know, but over time, we started to challenge that. So I would put up a T-chart and I would say, now what does slave mean? What does N mean? And they would fill in different words on one side. What does African mean? By the end of the year, you know, that part that dealt with Africa was full of so many powerful words. And then at the end of the year, when I asked who's African, all the hands went up because they understood their connection. They understood that was something powerful.
And they trusted you. They trusted that what you were doing was what they needed to have done in order to get to that place.
And that's because I did my work as an educator. I made sure when I came into the classroom, I was going to help to empower them. You know, it's one thing to say we're there to teach curriculum. We're there to teach children. So we have to know where they are. And we also want to empower them so they can see what's great within them. And then they can move from that and build off that potential. And that's what you see in classrooms. No matter who the teacher is, black or white, they see something in all their students. And they figure out a way to start pulling that stuff out.
Right.
And what child doesn't want to feel good about themselves?
Right.
And when they go into that classroom, they start learning to feel good about themselves by all the little successes they have, and then starting to look at themselves in a powerful light. And so many times all we get is the negative.
Right.
And we start thinking that's who we are. And we don't understand that's not who we are.
Yes, I think one of the most important things that you pointed out to us is something that we're trying to get all teachers on board with, and that is this whole business about mindset. If we don't change our mindsets, starting with us, if we don't change our mindsets, then when we walk into these classrooms, we are going to continue to go in that opposite direction, right, where everything is negative. And so that's some more opportunity for work to be done, is to talk about the mindset and to get the teachers to get on board and figure out, first of all, I think they need to figure out where their mindset is, and which is not very difficult to do, because if you're coming in with this negativity, all you need to know is that you're being negative. And if you know that you're being negative, then the mindset needs to shift. And that shift needs to be the exact opposite. There needs to be some positivity there. And so I think people like yourself, who very much awoke, you're aware of what's going on, there's also an opportunity for you as well to come in and figure out, using the tools from your book, using the 20 years of experience that you have, and using that platform that you have in terms of your job to really go out and start helping to get those people on board. And we know that you're not going to get everybody, but if you get one person at a time to get on, like you've changed some lives, I've changed some lives. If we get another person to change all of those people are going to change different, more and more lives.
That's
so
right.
it's the kind of work that it's hard,
Right.
because it's like you're changing the mindset of adults, people who are already set in their mindsets. But it's also it's rewarding when
Definitely.
you see it happening, right? When you see the things that children are doing that come up. I was sharing with a colleague the other day that I got a letter through one of my blogs on RLS Media, and this young man who's now in his 30s, he did some work, and his work was trying to find me. I had no clue that he was even looking for me, but he tried to find me, and he somewhere read something on one of my social media platforms that I was somehow connected with Rutgers. We all know Rutgers is a huge university. He found me and found the department that I was in and wrote a letter and had them send the letter to me. And the letter simply stated that you don't know this, but not only were you my favorite teacher, but you taught me about life. You taught me how to live my life a different way. I had no clue that I did that, right? But it just speaks to that whole urgency piece that we were talking about, and how it's so important to make sure that whatever we say, whatever we do, whatever child we're educating, whether they're red, yellow, black, white, or brown, we need to go in those classrooms with urgency and put into those children what it is that we would want someone to put into our very own.
Right.
So, having said that, we'll give you some comments around that. What do you think about that? And then we'll take a break.
You know what's really powerful, Mom, is just thinking about that mindset. That mindset is so incredible. When you shift, I remember seeing some of my toughest students, and they had fire in them. Now, other teachers looked at them and said, I don't want to deal with this child.
You could have him, right?
Right, but those were some of my favorites because I knew I could take that fire and move them to start really fighting for themselves in the community and challenging some of the oppression in the community. Those are our young soldiers. And so we could view them in a different way, you know. And when we have that mindset as a teacher, when we enter the classroom, we can either view our students in a negative light or we could view them in a positive, even if they're challenging. And we could say, wow, let me work with this young person.
Let me massage this person a little bit, right?
Because I see something.
Absolutely.
And I used to love my fire starters.
Yeah.
They were some of my favorite students.
Yes, absolutely.
And it could be a real serious challenge, but eventually, you know, those were the ones. We had a rites of passage program, and we would take young men from 6th to 12th grade, and often we would get young men from the alternative school, those ones who were, this was their last time.
Last shot at it.
This is your last shot. Those were some of our best.
Of course.
Those were some of our best, you know, and I love having them in my class. It was funny, many of those students, you know, my principal would say, okay, X, Y, and Z is about to be recommended for the alternative. What do you have to write? I'm like, well, that's one of my best students. I can't write anything negative.
Right. Well, we're going to have to stop right here. And again, the conversation can go on. And one of the things that I'd like to do is to have you come back to visit with us again, because this is powerful stuff. And it's the kind of stuff that we all need to hear. And so we invite all of you to make sure you come back as well. And look for the time when we have Joshua Rosenbaum coming back to us. This was part 2 of a 2-part series. However, we'd like to have Joshua come back. And we thank Tiniest Footprints Early Learning Child Care Center as well. Until next time, keep flying on your own wings. So,